Right, you start recording, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So hi everyone, this is the workshop on Git and GitHub. So I would say this workshop is highly recommended for anyone who's new to hackathons or new to coding, but I encourage everyone to come and you might learn something. So Git and GitHub is something that everyone will end up using sometime in the tech career and is a skill that I would make sure I'm familiar with the basics. So that's what this workshop will be all about. So I recommend, if you want to get the most out of this workshop, to install these tools. So a text editor, basically what you write code with. I recommend VS Code or Visual Studio Code, which is what I'll be using, but you can use your text editor of choice. And obviously we will need Git and a GitHub account and a terminal. And I'll just drop the links in the chat, and you can also get the slides after. Yeah, so I recommend you download at least Git and GitHub so you can take part in the interactive portion of the workshop later. So, and yeah, my video looks a bit messed up, but that's okay. Now we can get on to who I am. So I'm Lucy, and I'm a second-year computer science and biochemistry student at the University of British Columbia, and that's in Canada. So yay if you're from Canada. Right now, I'm a software engineering intern, part of the Microsoft Garage, which kind of emulates a startup. If you're interested in interning at Microsoft or Microsoft Garage, you can hit me up after. I also did research and development at the Proof Center, which is just kind of like a biotech research place at my university. And those are my socials if you feel like seeing me on any of those social media accounts. So what our agenda will be for today is that we'll be covering what is Git, how to use Git, what is GitHub, and how to use Git in GitHub, and also an interactive portion where you will put your GitHub and Git skills to the test. So before we start, I just want you to imagine this scenario. So, how many times have you been working on a project? 1 minute your code works, the next minute it breaks. And then you spend 2 hours trying to fix your code, and you comment out sections of code, you end up removing parts of code. And even though you've removed parts of code that you thought broke your project, your code is still broken. So do you just give up and cry? Well, actually, what if you could just go back to the version of code that was working, 1 minute ago? And well, is there a way to do this? And that's why, we use Git. So Git is what we call a version control system. And it just keeps track of the different versions of code. So we can go back to them, look at them, and it also helps us collaborate with each other. And if you're wondering what version control is, it's just a way to keep track of the changes. And you can think of Git works the same way as Google Docs, where you can look at the history. But one difference is that Git works offline, which is great because not everyone always has access to Wi-Fi. And, if you're on a Google Doc with 4 people at the same time, it gets chaotic. So that's why it's great that Git works offline. And that means Git allows people to work asynchronously, so independent of each other. You don't have to care about what your partner is doing to do your own thing. And Git is something that you will eventually learn in your coding journey, whether in school, your internship, or your job. And there's always usually some kind of Git integration in your text editor or integrated development system environment. So maybe you're wondering, how do I start with Git? How do I even add it to my project? And that's what we use Git init. So when you type the command Git init, it creates a Git folder inside of the project, and that Git folder keeps track of all of your changes to files. And you'll probably, if you have used Git before, you probably have never seen this before, and you're maybe wondering, why haven't I seen this before? And that's because if you see there's a dot in front, that is actually what's called a dot file or dot folder. And those types of files or folders are actually hidden from your file system, and there's a way to see them. But they're hidden because they're not really something that we should be editing. So usually you never manually edit this dot folder by yourself. So because if you do, stuff can happen. But that's what happens when you run Git init, and we'll be trying that out today. So once you Git init your project, this means files can be in different states. And these are just the states that a file can be in. And the first type of state that all files kind of start out as are untracked files. These are files that Git doesn't know exists. And that's sometimes you do have files that are untracked, sometimes like keys or secrets, and you don't want Git to know that they exist. And that's something, if you want a file to be untracked, you would add it to something called a git ignore file, which I recommend you search up later if you're ever dealing with secrets or credentials. If you do want Git to know that a file exists, then it becomes a tracked file. And basically Git is like, okay, every time I see this file changing, I'm going to make sure to track it down and let you know. And after a file is tracked, then it can be modified or unmodified. So an unmodified file is just a tracked file that has no changes. So when Git tracks a file, it keeps records of them. And if a file doesn't look any different from when Git previously saw it, then it will be an unmodified file. But if you decide to change the file and you haven't tracked it, you haven't told Git, Git will be like, hey, this file's been modified. There's unsaved changes. And if after you have modified a file, you can do what's called staging a file. So that means if you do have changes in a modified file, you add it to a staging area, and then that file is called staged, and we'll look at that a little later. And finally, the last stage of a file is it becomes committed. And once a file is committed, it goes all the way back to being a tracked file with unmodified changes. And you'll see kind of the flow. And this might sound a little confusing at first, but you'll understand a little more as the presentation goes on. So how do you check the state of a file? If you want to check the state of a file, you can write git status. And right now, Git is showing us that all these files have been untracked, and this is in Visual Studio Code. But if you see here, it's U, which means untracked. So even if you don't write git status, Visual Code is really great at telling you the stages of a file. And then once I do change it, so right here, this file, the style.css is untracked and index.html has been staged. That means I added a change to it and I've staged it. So now it's in the staging area, and a staged file is to be committed. So it's not committed yet. And that's, you can also see that in Visual Studio Code. So maybe you're wondering, how do you stage files and changes then? You do that with the command git add. And staging file means adding, turning an untracked file into a tracked file, or adding a modified file to the staging area. And there's two ways that you can use git add. If you just use git add with the period, that means you're adding all untracked files or all modified files to the staging area. But let's say you don't want to do that. You might only want to add index.html to the staging area. Then you would write git add index.html as shown on the right. And you can do that with all the files. Like you can do index.html, style.css, and just keep doing that. And that's up to you. So this is just showing how you can do that in Visual Studio Code. So you don't even need to use the terminal. But right now I'm just adding all the files to the staged area and turning them into staged files. And once they're in the staging area, the next step that can happen is that these files can be committed. So what is committing? When you decide to commit a file, it's like you're taking a screenshot of it. So this is like the stage that the file is saved in the version history. And you do that with git commit -m, which means like message, and then your commit message. And usually, when do you want to commit a file? A good time to commit a file is when you've made a substantial change. So if you've added a couple of lines of code that changes how your program runs, you're going to want to commit that file. You want to do it like every time you add a new feature, just so if one feature breaks the code, you have one commit attached to it, not you add 3 features and then you have one commit, but then you don't know which out of the 3 features actually broke your code. So this is how you can do that in Visual Studio Code. You can see that there's an M, which means modified. And then once you have all the files in the staging area, you type in your commit message, you hit commit, and then those are committed. And then they just disappear from the staging area. And then maybe if you want to see the different commits, you can do git log, and then it will show you all the commits you did. So this is a commit message, so you you have a general idea of what the commit was about, but you might want to see the files, and that's when you do git log, and then it shows the files that have been changed. So right here, it shows that app.js was changed. And all these cryptic looking things mean how many lines have been added or deleted. And then if you want, you can look at that a little more closely yourself, but that's how you can see which files have been changed. And this is just a guide for file states. So how an untracked file turns into a staged file, how an unmodified file turns into a modified file. And you see that once you reach the staged area commit, it goes all the way back to being a tracked unmodified file. And this is really good reference to look to whenever you get a little confused. So what are some good commit practices? When you should make a commit whenever you've added a new feature or about to add a new feature. So when your code is in a good working state, you might say in your commit message, like version of code that is working, and then you might start adding new code that you're not sure that works. Or when you've added a new file, you can just say added a new file for new page. Like if you're adding, let's say, a website, you want to add an about page, you say add a new file for about page. And you always want to try to have meaningful commit messages. So one thing you should not have in your commit message is like the time. Like don't say added file at 5 p.m. Saturday, February 24th, because Git records the time for you. You want to say like why you added the file or why you added the code. So you can say something like added code to add new dark mode to about page, or added code to fix bug that shifts the button when I click it. So you want to tell people why you added new code or new file. So don't try to make sure your commit messages don't state like the obvious, which is always hard. Making meaningful commit messages is hard. I'm guilty of making bad commit messages. So, this is always a work in progress to improve on. And also you should be committing working code. Usually people assume code that has been committed is working, especially in a group project. If you're working by yourself, you obviously have more leeway to commit broken code, but it's always best to commit code that's working. And I just want to kind of raise a question to everyone. Why do you think there's a staging area? Why can't we just add a modified file directly to commit it? Why do you think we have to stage it? This is like open question. I wouldn't have known the answer. So if you don't know, it's totally fine. Yeah, perfect. I hope I don't pronounce your name wrong, but Humeka said that in case you want to revert changes, and that's correct. Let's say you modify a file, you add it to the staging area, and you're like, wait, this code's actually broken. Well, great, it's in a staging area. You can just unstage it. And then you don't have to, go into your commits and be like, oh, which commit did I put in the bad code? So that's why you have a staging area, which is super important. So now we learned about committing. So that's like per file. But what if you want like a totally different kind of version of your project? So let's say you have a project and you need to change large parts of it. So let's say you have like an app, and then you want to make an experimental version that has what sometimes we call a breaking version. So you might want to make a version of your project, which means it's like completely separated parts of code, and you can make that with a branch. So we'll learn more about what a branch is later, but you can make a new branch with either set of commands. The one on the left is like a one-liner for people who like typing out everything in one line. And then the git branch, new branch is making the branch. Git checkout, new branch is actually switching to the branch. So now let's answer what's a branch and when should I make one? So like I said, let's say you have an app and you want to make an entirely experimental version of the app. This means you might be changing every single file, but you want to still have the stable version around for people to use. And that's not possible if you keep building on it. So what you can think of a branch is like an entire copy of a project that's independent. So you can have something that's called a main branch, and you can have something that's called a feature branch or experimental branch. And the main branch is completely independent of like a feature branch. So you can think of each branch as representing an independent line of development. So if you add code to a feature branch, it will not do anything to the main branch. And this is great for working together, for teams working asynchronously. So when I'm working at Microsoft, I work with teams from India, Kenya, and Seattle, and we're all in different time zones. We're usually never ever coding at the same time. So I work on a branch that's named after me. So if someone wants to go check on whatever I'm doing, they'll check the Lucy branch. And if they want to check what my teammate is doing, they'll just search up the branch for my teammate's name. And it allows teams to work asynchronously. So I don't have to care about what my teammate is doing in order to do my work. And just a general assumption is that a main branch or a master branch is stable, and it's like a good copy of the code, and a feature branch or an experimental branch is unstable. So it's allowed to be broken and not like work. So this is how you can add a branch via the terminal. And this is showing the one-line way. I forget if I show the two-line way. But what it does is it makes a new branch and it actually moves to it. And you can see that it changes on the bottom right hand of the corner. And yeah, I'm showing the second way. So I'm making branch name Citro, and then I switch over to Citro. So that means when I add code or commit code, it's committed to the Citro branch. It will not do anything to new branch. So question, for branches, would it be good to make a separate branch for backend and for front end? That usually that's up to, yeah, I think that is a good idea to have code branches for front end and back end. And that actually does happen sometimes in industry. You know, people who are working on front end code have their own branch or even entirely separate project. And the back end team or the back end code is on a different project or different branch. So, and then they just connect it later when they're both satisfied, and we'll learn about that later. And if you want to switch between branches, that's checkout. So we go back here, checkout is how you switch branches. So it's kind of like checking out a library book kind of, but checkout is how you switch between branches. So if you do git checkout main, then you're on the main branch. Git checkout feature branch, then you're on the feature branch. Yeah. I'll just answer one more question. So package log JSON. Yeah, package log JSON. If you're not familiar with that, that's just a really giant file. Like it's over 5,000 lines. And usually you should not add it to tracked files because it will always cause merge conflicts. But that's kind of like a question for people interested in JavaScript. Yeah, but in shorter hackathons, yeah, in hackathons, it's fine. In hackathons, you don't care about merge conflicts because most hackathon projects are not stable. There's always, some parts of it are broken. So it's fine if you commit a package log JSON, but in industry, you usually do not because it can cause a project to break. But you can also ask me that later too. Yeah, so this is how you can add a new branch with Visual Studio Code. So no terminal, no commands. I'm not sure if you saw that, but I clicked here on the bottom right, and then I adding a new branch, and I'm just bad at typing, but yeah, then when you make a new branch, it checks out, and then that's how you can add a new branch, so the create new branch. Okay. Next, so this is what a branch could look like. So this is what a main branch is. A main branch, so that's like stable. It's usually has less work done to it because it's the stable branch is usually old code, and the feature branch, this is the branch where engineers will be adding a lot of new code to because that's the branch that they'll usually be working on. So a lot of people were probably thinking like, how do I bring the branch together? Because eventually your feature will eventually be stable enough and good enough that you do want to add it to the main branch so people can actually use it. So how do you want to, bring it back together? And that's something called merging branches together. So usually branches, if each branch, like the feature branch, you're going to merge the feature branch into the main branch, not the other way around, because you want to merge features into main. So how you do that, we'll also we're going to try and cause a merge conflict in the interactive portion, and then try to merge it. So what you do is you check out the main branch, which is A branch, and then merge something into it, which is B branch. So A checkout, this is how you switch to a branch. So when you run git checkout A branch, you've switched to A branch. And then when you run git merge B branch, Git will take all the code from B branch and try to match it against A branch, and it will try to add basically all the different stuff from B branch into A the best it can. So that's what merging would look like. As you can see, all the feature branch stuff is brought into the main branch. And obviously, best case scenario is it works perfectly, there's no conflicts, and then when you try to run the main branch again, it will have your new feature, and it will work perfectly, but that usually never happens. And that's what we get is a merge conflict. So what is a merge conflict? Basically, merge conflict happens is when Git is kind of stupid and Git is like, I don't know which line of code to keep, so you're going to have to tell me. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll tell you. So that means you have to go into the code and be like, okay, Git, I want to keep this line, but I don't want to keep this line. So, and there's a bunch of ways that we can resolve a merge conflict. You can do it in the terminal, which is, I actually don't like doing that. It's kind of, I don't like working the terminal for merge conflicts. Visual Studio Code, this is the way I like best, and the browser. So if your merge conflict is small enough, you can just resolve it in GitHub. But if it's large, then you have to do it in Visual Studio Code or the terminal. So how can we resolve a merge conflict? These are the steps kind of reiterated again. You check out the main branch, you merge the feature branch, and then you resolve the merge conflict and optionally delete the feature branch. So this is me having a merge conflict. So I'm checking out master or main, and then I'm merging the feature branch, and this is the merge conflict. It doesn't know which line to keep. So you can accept both changes, reject both, accept incoming. So incoming would be the feature branch, and then it will also say accept current changes, which is the main branch. And I'll just let this run again for everyone to see what's going on. So just answer a question. So if I had two branches made, main and experimental, just inputting checkout and the branch name will switch me over to the other branch. And any changes I make in one branch specifically will come and go. So I can answer the first part, just inputting checkout and the other branch. And inputting checkout and the branch will switch me over to the other branch, correct? And any changes I made in one branch specifically will come and go. I'm not sure what you mean, but if you check out to experimental branch, all the changes you make will stay in experimental branch. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question. Okay, but so far, I haven't told you how you can collaborate with people on a project. And all I've talked about is Git. So you're probably wondering, when's Lucy going to talk about GitHub? And that's what we'll talk about next. So now let's add all your friends. So now you're working with a bunch of people on a project. Before it was kind of solo by yourself. So how might you work together? So some people might use Google Docs, or a REPL, or do you just have everyone code on the same computer? Obviously, these methods could work, but they're slow. So if you're in Google Docs, you need to make sure the line of code you're adding doesn't overlap someone else's. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm typing Google Docs, sometimes someone puts their cursor on what I'm typing, and then both our sentences get screwed up. So that's not good. And the first method, using Google Docs or REPL, you need a stable internet connection. And where I live in Alberta, our Wi-Fi is not stable. So that's definitely not a good way to use if somebody's Wi-Fi decides to be bad during a hackathon. And lastly, not everyone's in the same room. So not everyone can code on the same computer. So what do you do then? Well, that's when GitHub comes in. So what GitHub is, it's a code hosting platform formally for collaboration and version control. And can anyone guess what type of version control GitHub uses? So Git is not the only type of version control. There's actually a lot of types, but anyone want to guess what version control GitHub uses? It's in the name, and that's what the version control we've all been talking about so far. So yeah, GitHub does use Git as its version control, and GitHub is not the only code hosting platform. There's a lot. For instance, at work, I use something called Azure DevOps, but that's like for industry, but most people just use GitHub. And if you're in a group coding a project, you will most likely be using GitHub at some point. And you can also use GitHub on your own. A lot of people like to just document their code and put it on GitHub for the world to see. So everything I talk about will kind of be now group-based, but all of it still applies to solo hackers as well. So far, our repository is a local repository. So that means it only exists on our computer. So when we did git init, that project only exists on our computer. No one else can see it. But with GitHub, now we'll be making a remote repository. So that means this project exists somewhere on some data server, however miles away. So it's on GitHub, it's on the internet, and anyone can access it if it's public. So how do we make a local repository remote? So how do we put it on GitHub? So these are the steps that you can take to put it on GitHub. So we've already done git init, git add, git commit, and git branch. And main is making a branch if you haven't already. But the most important step is git remote add origin, and then the GitHub URL. So this is usually what the URL looks like, usually a GitHub username and the remote repository name. And then you do git push u origin main. So obviously, this repository has to already exist on GitHub, and I believe we'll be demoing that today. And then you do git push u origin main. So u means set upstream. So that means you're also making your branch exist on GitHub too, because so far your branches are local too. They only exist on your computer. So now you're wondering, how do we bring a remote repository onto our machine to make a local one? So that's when you go to GitHub, you do git clone, you paste in the URL, and then you will so-called clone the remote repository onto our local machine, and then you will have a local version of the repository on your machine. And that's it. And if you do cd, and then that's just the command to open up Visual Studio Code, then that project will be on your computer too. So that adds a new command, git push. So right now, everything we've been doing only exists on our local computer, but we want to put it on GitHub. So that's when we need to do git push. So after we do git add, commit, then we do push. So you push is putting the code on a branch. So when you do git push, you're putting the code on GitHub. And origin just means the branch that exists on GitHub. So a remote branch is also called origin branch. So that's what the origin is for. And then you have the branch name. If you use GitHub, if you use git push without origin or branch name, just like git push, then it will just push, you will push to the origin of whatever local branch you're on. And we will hopefully, we'll see that in the interactive portion. Okay, but sometimes when you're working in a group, you might get this error. If you try to git push, it says, can't push refs to remote, try running pull. And then you get this weird error. And you're like, what does that mean? So now let's see what that means. So basically, this usually happens when two people are working on the same branch. So if you look here, let's say person A decides to commit something and push to the remote branch. So person A's remote branch and local branch are exactly the same. But then person B tries to push something. but person B's local branch, so these blue circles just represent commits, person B's local branch no longer matches the remote branch. So this commit that person A pushed now is on GitHub, but person B does not have it on their computer yet. So when they try to push GitHub, we'll say, stop, there's something that's remote on the remote, a branch that doesn't match your local branch. Please get please pull, so git pull, please pull the remote changes and then try pushing. So that's why this command comes up now, git pull. It just usually means the code on your computer does not match the code on GitHub. And before you can push anything from your computer to GitHub, the local and remote branches have to match. And usually this can be resolved with git pull. Okay, so now let's get to merging code with others, or this is just merging branches together. But when you're merging with others, there's a kind of an extra step you might want to take. So, and all your friends are also in different locations. So your friends are in different locations. You decide to split the project into 4 parts and everyone works on their own branch. So how do you merge the branches together? Do you email each other files and then have one person be the person who puts all the files together into a project? Or do you text each other code? Sometimes I do that. It's not the best, but it's fast. Or do you use pigeon mail? Obviously, no one does that. So maybe there's an intelligent way to merge code together. And that's when you might want to make a pull request. So when you make a pull request, it's a way of letting other people know you have a feature branch or you have code that you want to merge into the main branch. And before we were just merging branches in the terminal, we weren't telling anyone about it. But when you're in a project working together, or this is what we're seeing here is an open source project called Create React App on GitHub. And there are hundreds of people working on this. So can you imagine hundreds of people merging code and not telling each other? It would be horrible. So that's why we have pull requests. And basically, it just, you make a pull request. This lets people know that Lucy has a feature branch. She wants to merge into the main branch. And then a pull request will also show you which files have merge conflicts. And it also pulls up all the changes in the feature branch that want to be added to the main branch. So we will also be trying out to make PRs in the interactive portion. And yes, you can use Git in your computer terminal or a VS Code terminal. And the VS Code terminal is actually your computer terminal, but VS Code made it look nice. Okay, so I have like an interactive project that I want to demonstrate pull requests and working together. So what it is like a website, it's a hacker gallery for Citro hacks. And basically you will just add your card to it to show that you participated in Citro hacks. So it would be nice to have some volunteers just to show that we can collaborate together, even though we might be in completely different countries. But if no one's comfortable with volunteering, I can also just do this by myself. So I'll just give a few seconds for people to volunteer. If you volunteer, it'd be great if you can comment or like send a chat message, and then I'll know that someone else is wanting to join. Okay, great. We can have Rohan and Amina volunteer. So if you want to volunteer, make sure you have a GitHub account, a text editor, and Git installed. So if you want to check that Git is installed, you can type Git and it will show up all this stuff. I will just open up the project. Okay. So I'll keep this on the side. So I will just check. I will need a few moments to set up. Okay. actually to make sure that this project does not exist on Git, because I will be making it a remote project. So let's see, this is how you can open up terminal. Okay. Okay, great. So how do we tell that a project is local or has no branches? So right now, there's no branches. So you might have seen master before, but now the master is gone. So what I'm going to do is turn this local project into a remote project, and also demonstrate a git ignore file. So if you've ever ever worked with JavaScript, there's something called node modules. It's just like giant bunch of JavaScript files that you do not want to commit, or you don't want it to end up on GitHub. So what you can do is you make a git ignore file, and that's here, and then you type in the folder that you want to ignore. And then that means it will be ignored. So I'll show you what happens when Git is initialized. So right now, Git is not initialized. There's no stuff. If I try git add, it will say not a Git repository. So that means no Git right now. If I do git init, it'll say initialized empty Git repository. And then you see that all my files become untracked. And also the node modules becomes kind of like shadowed or like grayed. And this means Git saying, okay, I understand the node modules folder is untracked. So I will ignore it, pretend it doesn't even exist. So I'm just going to add all these files. I want all of them to show up. And this is the package.json. So right now it's really small because I didn't install much things, but when you install more stuff, it gets big. So for a hackathon, I would say it's fine to just commit it. So I can do git add. When I do dot, it will add them all. If you go here, all these files are staged now. Then I'll do git commit. You can just, git commit. I forgot the message. You can just do starting project. Yep, and it's all gone. So, but if I try to push, let me try pushing. It'll say, nope, there's nowhere to push to. There's no GitHub repository. So now let's make a GitHub repository. So you can make a new repository, clicking the new, where's the title? Oh, repository name. You can do like my website or just git demo. That's what it will be. So that's the repository name. I will make it public. I already have a git ignore. Then I create a repository. And GitHub is even super nice. That's telling me what to do. So what I need to follow is push an existing repository from the command line, because I've already done git init and the git add. So I do git remote add origin. And this is the GitHub URL. I just paste it in, and then the remote is added. And I think if you do git remote, it will show you that's origin, and origin is referring to this. Then I need to make a branch, because right now it made a default master branch, but maybe I just want to rename it as main. Then it will do that. It makes the branch main. But on default, it makes a master branch. And then I finally do git push u origin main. So you might notice that there's a u in this one, but in the presentation, there is no u. So you only need to add the u if it's the first time that you're pushing a local branch to their GitHub. Because if I refresh, nothing shows up yet. There's no branch or code or anything. So if I go here and then I paste this in, now this branch will show up on GitHub. Yeah. So if I go here, I refresh, and yay, it shows up. So now for everybody who is volunteering, what I want you to do is I'll also kind of go along with you is I want you to go to this GitHub repository and let me know when you're done. I'll give you all a few seconds. So just click on that link and then you'll show up here. Should we use Git in our computer terminal or VS Code terminal? It doesn't really matter. I just use it here because it's inside, but if I wanted to, I can open up the terminal. The annoying thing is that when you open up your terminal in Visual Studio Code, it's already inside your project, but right here it's not. So I have to like navigate to the project and then I have to open it like that. Or I don't have to open it, but then I have to navigate here because I want to be doing all my Git stuff where my project is. So I would imagine that everyone who wants to volunteer has clicked on the link. And if you're clicked on the link, what you want to do next is go here, copy this. And then you want to open up your terminal right here. And then you want it, so wherever you want your project to be, so if you want it to be like in a folder, like codes folder or projects folder, you want to navigate to that like this, wherever you want it to be. So for instance, I prefer if it's in this folder I made called codes, because that's where I put all my code related stuff. Then you do git clone paste. And then after you have this command, I will also copy it here into the chat. So that's all you need. And then you clone it. And then that's done. Okay, so hopefully volunteers have already done that, but I will now go on to the next step. So I will open up this in a live server. And this is what it looks like right now. It might look different for you if you don't have NPM, like it might look kind of wonky, like the cards might not work, but it will have the same general form. And let's say I want to add a new animal called an otter. I'll add a new otter, an otter animal to the hacker gallery. So let's pretend I'm somebody cloning the code for the first time. So I'm going to make a new branch and name it otter, or like add otter card. And or I can do this in the terminal actually. So right now I'm on the main branch. This means the branch I make will be exactly the same as the branch I'm on. So if you, let's say you want to make a feature of a feature, that means you want to switch to the feature branch before you make a branch. So I do want this feature branch to be the same as the main branch before I start adding stuff. So I'll do git branch, otter card. So now I made it, but I'm still on main. I haven't checked out or switched to it. Try cloning repository is not found. I did just try and clone it here. And I don't think it's private. You might want to try again. Sometimes the Wi-Fi is slow. Probably means you tried cloning it before I made it remote. Yeah, okay, perfect. So then you want to open it, and if you've been following along, make your own branch. So I made a branch named otter card, git branch otter card. You can like do git branch rohan card, and then that'll be your branch. And then you want to check out. So git checkout otter card. And then Git will say, okay, I switched to the otter card branch, and now the bottom says otter card. So what I want you to do now is go to index.html. Basically, I have instructions here, and all that says is copy this template, fill in the fields with your own stuff. So you can just copy this, and you will add it here and delete that thing. So now you have this, and you want to change it to your name. And then you can add full fact or whatever you want. Otter, I'll just say I am Otter. And then if you want, you can get a picture. You can just get a picture for fun. So yeah, you don't have to add a picture, but or you can just add a random one. Yeah. So I thought I typed otter. Okay, so now go here. There's an otter picture. Then I'll just add it here. And if you have a live server, oops, where'd it go? Here. Yeah, now there is an otter, but it's not showing. Did I spell it wrong? Oh. Okay. So your website might look different because you're missing node modules, but since it's not much, I might just push it later, but yeah, we can do that later. So this is what it will look like now, but it might look a little different, but your card should show up if you're using a live server. And yeah, so now I'm like, yeah, I'm happy. This card looks great. It's working. I want to now make this branch remote to start a pull request. Yeah, so we can go here. I'll now commit the changes using Visual Studio Code's kind of interface. So you can add it. So this is equivalent to doing git add, and now they're staged. Commit message, add otter card. And when I do this, this is the equivalent of git commit -m add otter card commit. Okay, perfect. And now we can actually git push. So when I do git push, VS Code will ask me something. It'll say, this card has no upstream branch. Would you like to publish this branch? And we say yes. So this action is equivalent to the git push -u origin otter card. You click yes or okay. That push. Yeah, so it should show up on GitHub now. So yeah, right here, it says otter card has made recent pushes less than a minute ago. And I will wait for other people to do that too. So let me know when the volunteers have made their own cards. Yeah, so if you're volunteering, just let me know what stage you're at so I can help you if you've come across any bugs or any issues you're stuck at. So Rohan, how are you doing? And also Amna. You can just be like doing good or almost done in the chat. Okay, great. And just to reiterate the steps again, so I would assume that, so you can do git branch to make your branch, and then git checkout, and then edit the code the same way I did by adding a new div card. And then you can go to VS Code here, and then you will have some files. So you can do git add, and then you can do git commit message. So this won't work because it will say you have nothing to commit. Yeah, it'll be like you have nothing to commit. And then after you commit, you can do git push. Git push u origin otter branch. And then those are the steps that you take for your branch to end up here. So I'll just go back here so everyone can see the instructions.
For the second part, do we add order branch or do we add our branch?
I think the question was, do we add order branch or our own branch? Add your own branch. So for instance, for Rohan, you can do a Rohan card. Oops. So make sure your branch is different. GitHub and Git does not let you have duplicate branches. Like it doesn't let you make branches with the same name because each branch is like its own thing. So make sure your branch name is unique from the branches that have already been made. So anything but main and anything but order card.
Yeah, it's giving me an error saying that that it's denying permission and I'm unable to access it, and it requests URL return 403.
Can you paste the error into the chat? It's just that I cannot hear you that well. My sound is kind of messed up, but if you can post the error into the chat, we can try to get through it. Which command is this? Are you trying to push?
Git push.
And also, if you ever are in trouble, just Google. I guess you're getting this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It means you have not set up your credentials or something. Yeah, so that means you did not set up authentication for Git. So that's why it's not working. Are you doing this through Visual Studio Code or Terminal, or like Computer Terminal?
Visual Studio Code.
Okay. This is like part of the Git setup. It's annoying because GitHub changed this a while ago. Let's try to solve this. Basically, GitHub usually used to before that in the terminal, you just enter your GitHub password, but they changed it to make it more secure. It's annoying though. I also had this problem before. Okay, so can you try doing this? Can you push through Visual Studio Code versus instead of terminal? Because Visual Studio Code might help you solve the auth error.
How do we get that menu?
Sorry, can you say that louder?
How do we get that menu?
Oh, yeah, click the 3 dots. Oh, you can, so you're here, click this source control thingy, the 3 dots, and then push.
It says my branch has no upstream branch.
And then click
So if I
yes.
would like to publish it.
Yeah, yes or okay, whatever that panel menu says.
And yeah, it's still saying you don't have permission to push it on GitHub. Would you like to create a fork and push it to it instead? So it's just asking
You
if I
can
can push it to a fork.
Yeah, you can push to a fork too, just so we can see your code online too. And then we can merge it that way as well. Oh, collaborator. That might actually be the issue. Okay, so you can either push a fork or wait for me to add you as collaborator. If you want, actually, yeah, that might be the case. I forget to do that. Okay. So you can just push to a fork or send me your GitHub name. Either is fine. Thank you, Arnav, for the tip. Hopefully this solves the issue. So Rohan, which way did you decide to go?
I tried doing a fork and then I tried doing like this other method that prompted me. The first method did not work, but I'm not sure about the fork one since it isn't running anything. And I clicked it.
Okay, so if you go to your GitHub account, or you can send me your GitHub username, and then I'll check if the fork was made. Oops, that's not right. Yeah, you did make a fork. Okay, so stuff happens in GitHub, but this is great learning opportunity. So what we learned thanks to this thing we tried is that Rohan actually needs to be collaborator to my GitHub repository before he can push to it. So if you want to avoid this working in a project with others, you go here, you go to settings, manage access, invite a collaborator, and then you put in the GitHub username like that. And yeah, so he has, or they have made a fork, and you can, and you see here GitHub is saying compare and pull request. So usually you can, this is also another way to work together with people. You can make a new branch, but if you, let's say that Rohan actually doesn't have access to my project, then they can make a fork. And when you make a fork, GitHub will ask, do you want a pull request? So you can do compare and pull request. So fork means, so when you make a branch, we go here, branches are still part of my project, but when you go to a fork, you see it's part of Pro Ballstar. So this is actually now their own project. They're no longer working even on my project anymore. So it's like cloning, but it's still semi-connected. Yeah, so we are going to merge. So let's see, we can make a pull request, and we can go here to see the files that have changed. So this is what have changed. Yeah, so this is the commit that is the, I want to merge this, his main, I want to merge one commit from my author card into their main branch. So I guess Rohan, did you actually make a branch with your own card?
Yeah.
I don't think it showed up. So can you try adding and committing again?
So I'm adding it.
Oh, did you make a sky card?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's the branch. So now that we forked it, it's a little different. So we'll just work off of this repo instead. So let's pretend this is the main repo. So the main branch is a stable branch, and now we have otter card and sky card. So let's try merging two branches then. So this one is the add otter card branch. So this is merging otter card into Rohan's main branch. And then we can go to sky card, and then we can make a pull request here. So let's see. Let's merge sky card, and forking is a little different. So you see now you can fork, you can merge. So this will be a little confusing, but you can merge sky card branch from Rohan's repository into my repository, Pro Ballstars repository, or Riley Chow. So let's just try merging into my repo. So we will create a pull request, and there. So even though we forked it, we can still merge it back into my repo. And right here, there's no merge conflict. So shark thingy, and yeah, so it's merging Riley Shark into my main, and there's no merge conflict, so we can just merge it. And let's see, so when Riley's branch is merged, it will automatically update here. So let's see if there's any merge conflicts. So there's no merge conflicts. I thought Git would make one, but I guess it's smart enough not to. And then you can merge. Okay, so now if I go here, now if you go look at the commit history, there's two branches that have been merged. So let me try adding a card. So if I try to edit something, so this is like spelled wrong. So if I try to, let me just undo that. Okay, so let me switch over to main branch, and then I will try to do this. I'll say, oh, there's a spelling mistake. I'm going to commit the file. So spelling error, and I'll push, but I'm going to get an error. Oh, I meant to push. Okay, I meant to push, and then that would have gotten an error, but I pulled, and when I pulled, did everyone see that the code showed up here? So that's what pulling does. Yeah, so if we go here, index.html, sky. Yeah, so now it looks the same here. Yeah, so that's what happened. That might have been fast, but I'm going to try to force a merge conflict. Okay. I keep forgetting to switch. Just so everyone can see what merge conflict looks like. Hopefully, so I'm just going to do like random stuff to try and get a merge conflict. Okay. Compare and pull request. Okay, so I've made a merge conflict. So this merge conflict, so when you do get a merge conflict, this is what it will look like. So I'll create a pull request, and what's good about GitHub pull requests is that it will show you which files have merge conflict. So this one is an index.html, And right now it's simple enough that I can actually resolve it in the browser. But if it's too complicated, you can only do it in Visual Studio Code, but I'm just going to do it in the browser. And this is what it will look like. Okay, yeah, so there are actually is a merge conflict, but not where I added one, which is interesting. So I don't want this line, so I can just delete it. But so here's a merge conflict. And what this is saying is all the code between like this equals equals and then these alligator thingies, this came from AutoCAD branch. And over here, this code came from main branch. So the thing is I actually want to keep both. So what I can do is when you merge resolve a merge conflict, you want to delete these things. So when you delete it, that means Git will say, okay, you've resolved it. So then you just want to fix up formatting a little, and then yeah, that looks good. You mark as resolved, commit merge, and that's all. And then you wait for Git to check, and then great, you merge it. And I will now demonstrate.
Hey Lucy, sorry to interrupt, but we're running a little over time, so.
But yeah, that was the extent of it. I think that was pretty much all I wanted to show, just forcing a merge conflict. But yeah, that's it. And this is a review. If anyone ever wants to just look at a cheat sheet of Git commands going forward, these are some more resources if you want to look into Git commands more deeply. And there's the GitHub, or if you want to learn how to use GitHub more, you can check out these resources or ping me on Discord. And always Google, Google your errors always. And that's all from me. So thank you for coming to this workshop. Hopefully everyone here tries to use Git for their projects. And yeah, good luck on your projects.
Thank you, Lucy. That was really informative. I definitely learned a lot, even though I already used Git before. So.
Yep, that's great. Git is always your friend when you're coding. Always can be annoying too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone has questions, you can send them in the Discord chat. So you don't bother the other workshop hosts.
Yeah, before our next workshop, we're gonna end the meeting so the recording can process. So we'll join back on this Zoom link. Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.